So we are an interdisciplinary group that work in the fields of art, design, architecture, and aesthetics. And this is a side project for us, apart from our normal jobs. And we have some funding from Kulturbryggan. We took a postmaster's course together called Resources. And that year we focused on the topic of migration, which led to looking into borders and ownership. So the project we present today, we started during this resources year, and then it carried on since then. It is a mapping of ownership of the local centers in the city of Stockholm. And our focus in this work is to see how mapping and infographics can make ownership and economic relations visible, and how to depict complex narratives without simplifying. Our starting point was that counter-mapping can work as a strategy to show other narratives and causalities. Mapping can be a violent process, and the violence is found in both the content and the practice. Our map is a representation of gentrification, which is a brutal reality for many living in the city, and a violence that is happening daily. So we have to see that this is a mapping of violence, and the ethics involved become evident when aesthetic decisions are made, when information and data is reduced and sometimes can seem like cold simplifications. So basically nothing is neutral. An important step is to allude to James Corner's suggestion to reformulate what already exists. And even if this map connotes sort of authoritarian, colonial, and Eurocentric approaches to the world, it also has emancipatory potential to show what is not visible and propose other spatial relations. Every map proposes a narrative. It establishes a world. This map shows the Stockholm subway station, which everyone recognizes immediately if you live in this town. First of all, it indicates the property owner of the local center. And we chose these specific stations because they all have a local center in connection to the subway with a center building or a public space or area planned for public activity. Also, we'll explain more in detail and go into specific rights, especially for the right to demonstrate in these public spaces. But I want to mention that this autumn, which is like an added relevance to a map like this, the Green Party in Stockholm proposed that the city of Stockholm should start to take rent for demonstration, and this is sort of like terrifying news for us. This is just one instance of how many of our rights are being under attack right now, including the right to strike, and in other countries, the right for abortion. So this kind of mapping and the importance of images to remind us of these rights are sort of crucial, and in this case, where there's a literal price per square meter in order to demonstrate, actually indicates that there's a class divisions based on property ownership and the limitations of democracy that come with it. And of course, the discourse on rights that have its own inherent problems, but it often points towards an individual or a preconditioned group, but it might also work as a starting point to start conversations, thoughts, actions that go beyond the given. This map has been shown and published in different exhibitions, publications, squats, protests, and conferences related on the discourse of public spaces and privatization struggles. Some background is that many Stockholm suburbs, as you very well know in this room of architecture studies, that they were built according to this ABC urban planning scheme. So during the Million Program construction projects in the 60s and 70s, these suburbs were built as nodes around each subway station, where you have A, your arbete or job, B, bostad, home, C, centrum or local center square.
Right. Is it okay if I sit here?
Yeah, sure.
So significant for these local centers from the 60s and 70s is that they are typically planned as large cohesive properties. This is significant within the zoning plan for these centers. So in connection to the subway station, one usually finds a center building for a local service and retail. And the common areas within the building function as an indoor square. And outdoor squares adjacent to the center are often built on the same property and not designated as public land in the zoning plan. So one of the most well-known examples of this is Stockholm, which this is the zoning plan map for. And what it basically shows is that this is just one large cohesive property without distinction between the public and private properties within the zoning plan, which is kind of typical to the planning of the 60s and 70s. As when these centers were planned, one can assume that it was kind of taken for granted that the centers would remain within public property and within the ownership of the city. So with the shift of political governance and the growing influence of neoliberalism, as we have had some background to also, state or publicly owned spaces, housing and welfare services have been sold out and privatized. And these areas which were planned with the intention of functioning as public land thus fall into private ownership. So for example, in 2007, 10 of the local centers in Stockholm were sold to the venture capitalist called Boatby, which was a very well-known enterprise and has been a big failure for the city of Stockholm with large consequences. And right now, the municipality of Sundbyberg are in the process of selling 2 of their local centers in Hallonbergen and Riesling to private property owners. And in this example, which is Hagsätra, IKEA or Ikano now owns the center on the square. So it's influential, to say the least. So in our map, we have made many different versions where we are considering the visual language and how to relay information about these new owners of the centers. So in this version, we show the logo and a portrait of the owner and a short info box about the struggles that came with the changes of ownership. So in the discourse of the segregated city, we wanted to show the faces of the property owners as a strategy of making them more visible and thus also accountable. So rather than focusing on the histories of the people exploited by the neoliberal urban development processes, or the individuals generating change through their consumption patterns, we wanted to visualize a segment that is often hidden in the discourse about unjust city. So we were looking for another narrative about finance, basically. Because the visual language and also the dramaturgical language used for narratives about finance in the world is often murky, mysterious, and thriller-like, as Erling Björnviksson and Ida Börje described in their text Follow the Money, which is a summary of their artistic research project Stadsfabla, which is focusing on investments in Västerhamnen in Malmö. So there's quite a striking visual effect of bringing in the faces into the discussion, not only referring to the surprise that they're all white old men, usually, or all of them. In this context, these images are also an attempt to connect the abstraction of ownership and capital to a more sense data of everyday perception. But we also wanted to focus on the legal implication of the changes in ownership and on the rights we still have, even if they fall into privately owned properties. So even if these centers usually signal something else. So what we have been kind of investigating in the map is where we indicate the degree of public accessibility of the center in terms of property versus public land. So there are different kind of categories that we have been making, where there's a center building with no outdoor square, a center building or with no square on public land, or a center building where the square is on property owner's land, center building with the square partly on public land, and center zoning plans also regulate that these center areas are areas for the purpose of center activities like shopping, meeting, and gathering. And public land here is defined as land that is inherently public and cannot be sold without changing the zoning plan. So the property can be either publicly owned or privately owned, but there's a difference between public land and public property, which is a bit technical, but it's something that we have to implement. So the circle show the specific status of the zoning plan in relation to public land. And then we were interested in understanding and exposing the consequences of the changes in ownership and how it affects the activity and usage of the public spaces. So along with the gentrification and brutal clearances affecting the housing situation in these suburbs, which often comes along with the same processes, the local centers are particular hotspots, attracting venture capitalists and real estate investors. So to see how these new owners managing their spaces relate to civil rights, we wanted to do like a litmus test for the right to demonstrate. So more technicalities. In the Constitution, we have the right to meet and demonstrate. This law is regulated under the traffic violation laws. So as long as you do not disturb traffic, spread disease, disturb the general order, you have the right to make a circus show, even without formal permit application. For larger meetings and demonstrations, one must apply for permission. And it's important to note that police do not have the right to deny permit on the basis that the property owner does not agree with the demonstration. The problem then is rather the definition of public space. But again, this should be noted out because this is also regulated by traffic laws, which say that public land in the zoning plan is always public space. And private property is also public space under certain circumstances, which is that indoor areas that are regularly trafficked, such as malls and marketplaces, during their opening hours are also considered public space. So despite this, most mall owners or local center owners ignore or give signs that their property does not function as a regular public space.
But to test these principles was talked about, we created this fictive association called mdgh, and this fictive association later on also give name to our group. But this fictive association, mdgh, which is an acronym for like mot den globala hemlösheten, against the global homelessness, we were basically, I can translate it later on, but emailing different mall owners saying that we are coming to demonstrate at this area. And out of the 15 or 19 I think, emails that were sent out, only 2 of them gave us correct answers. And then of course we can't know if they know about it but don't care, or if they don't know about these legal things. But what we can see, of course, is that this is, this could of course be framed as a democratic problem. And I can translate some of the answers, just so we're basically saying hello, that we would like to come to you the 25th of April to demonstrate against the global homelessness, which is to give, to make awareness about this question. We will have a shorter demonstration and make a fundraising for the victims. We don't know how many people that will show up, but considering the urgency in the world, maybe 50 to 100 people can show up. If there would become any trash, we will of course pick it up after ourselves, and we will bring our own sound system. So, and like all of these answers, so only 2 was correct, but the more general one would be like, hello, we don't allow demonstrations in the Galleria, despite how good the cause is. But you could apply for it from the municipality at another place close by. Or, thank you for your question, but this type of activity is not possible to have in the Galleria. Good luck with your engagement, and so on. And when we these mails are a crucial part of our mapping. So of course the mapping goes beyond the map, and we always show this at exhibitions and when we have articles, and it's somehow maybe to see that it's like in the relation or the gap between the map and these emails that we are also allowed to go beyond the visual graphical conventions, that we could, show more qualitative and non-linear ways that are harder to use in this two-dimensional map. And but currently, just to speak what we've done recently is, first of all, we've tried to update the map. That since we did the first version 3 years ago, I think it's 7 changes. At least 7 changes that have been done, then more are on the way. So we have updated all of the data. We have also gathered all of the historical changes in ownership. So we have this data. And what we also have done, and this is maybe we can say it louder, like how we work is that we don't divide work in the sense that after our professions we try to be all of us are part in all of the processes. But what we have done now is that we've created a collaboration with a web expert and hacker, Mattias Tervo, to start to digitalize the map. And this, of course, allow new functions. We can see about, we're now in trying to make the temporal aspect, where you could see how all of the ownership changes over time. Yes. And also that we want to follow each company by following the money as a method to see who owns who. And this, of course, this becomes very interesting, because then, of course, how to visualize the uneven, or how to visualize capital in all its immateriality is, of course, both a cognitive and an aesthetic problem. I know, for example, that you and me, Tatiana, and also throughout these years here, I have also spoke about this in relation to different mapping projects. And I think, one book that has, or as Jeff Kinkel and Alberto Toscano, they wrote this book, Cartographies of the Absolute, I think 2 or 3 years ago, that has been somehow, which is about going back to Frederick Jameson's cognitive mapping, like how to do this. And they are actually invited. They will come in the beginning of March. They're invited by Kim West to speak at Rutia Golvet. And I think, they put it like the question is how to depict and present a visual and narrative proposition about the social forces that shapes the present, or what's at the stake is the figurability or representability of our present and its shaping effects on our political actions. And but the use of our map, this very simple map, there's of course plenty of more or less fantastic collaborative mappings and map projects at the web that many of them has inspired us. But you could also see how all of them are struggling with exactly these aesthetic questions. But also what we have found out is many of them, even that we have a huge interest in this, is that they are very often hard navigating. Which is also, of course, a question about aesthetics. And in our map has this advantage that it's like very well known, and that first of all, we don't need to go into discussions about like preciseness and scales, which I think is very easy to get stuck in at the first place. And the other thing is that, of course, that everyone already know this subway map, and because it's very, it's important in our mental geographies of the city. So this is also the advantage of using this. But if we're going back to the fact that every map has its inherent mobilization and comes with a proportion, we could also see, of course, some weaknesses in our map. And I think one thing that became obvious also during the last lecture is that we miss, by reproducing the very strong binary between public and private, we miss a lot of things. First, we miss, of course, how, the strong relation between the public and the private. Historically, how the public have somehow made way for the private, and also today where we could see, for example, like this notion of business development districts that either inspiring or managing of the spaces, or people even use these names, I mean, through the lens of the entrepreneurial urbanism and so on. So this we miss, and we're thinking of how we could, what other functions we could add to this, to also discuss this. And the other thing, by reproducing these strong binaries between public and private, is of course that we also exclude once again the ideas about the commons, that this could be another way of managing the city, so as a common or as a common public partnership. So this is things we are struggling with right now, but maybe we could also see how it, I mean, suggests maybe, but it in itself suggests other, both geographies and alliances, that we, rather than like speaking about the city through its south-north axis, could start to see, I mean, how we see how the econo clusters in the city, we see what patterns CityCon creates in the city. So I mean, this opens it up for, and I mean, one obvious fact is of course also that it shows somehow that the unevenness, that we have to think of it as a relation and not as a, I mean, inherent fact that we could attach to a certain place. And then, I mean, one maybe utilitarian function we could, at least in an ideal way, think that the city, this map could play, is that if we look around in the city of Stockholm today, and of course, it's great that you brought up the countryside, but I mean, is that with all of these rapid transformations, which are very often comes with brutal consequences, is that people becomes experts in this field. I mean, we could really see how people, there's suddenly so many experts in the field of urbanism, but very often people have to do this research from scratch. So by showing this, I mean, one hope could be that you see that if you suddenly start to want to understand how CityCon, the strategies of them, you could see that people in somewhere else in the city has maybe made these experiences already 10 years ago. But I mean, to sum up, is that I think, I mean, some of us in this group, we had worked together before with questions around gentrification and the commons, but actually when we made this map, the first version came out almost 3 years ago. It was spread so quickly. And it's all suddenly allowed us to speak about these things in another way. So I mean, we could all see it maybe as you also pointed out, the need of images, needs of artifacts and needs of images and representations that speaks about these things. And we could see, but yeah, so we're still struggling with this, and we're struggling with the digitalization of the map, and also that we really want to expand beyond the 2D, so we are also how to do it more spatial installations and so on, to speak about these matters. And we're now doing it when we have time, but hopefully in the beginning of the summer, at least the digitalization the web function will exist. And this, I mean, the last Q&A was great, so maybe we could also speak more like this.
We should step to some questions and answers that are super fascinating. Have you looked at TripAdvisor as a possibility? You can put little comments on the map, and I don't know how they've stabilized. Maybe some people here know. You can implant in because you make comments, and like this is the restaurant, this is the thing. But you can put your own comments too. So it would be. I see something like that happening with you guys in any case.
But this could be. But we also spoke about this. I mean, the digitalization opens up for a lot of things. But there has been a lot of attempts doing this, more or less trying to interactive web mappings. I mean, one was this called Hyreskollen, which was, I mean, just tenants that wanted to create this report function for people to speak about their landlord. But this, I mean, with our limited resources, we have to take them into account very often. So somehow I think we have landed more than we want to not risk doing this, reproduce this interactive function that will just be go half ways, rather than that we would try to create the whole thing. But
I think it's super interesting. Thank you for the presentation. Very yeah. But I'm thinking of this when we speak about also different perspectives on things, as you said, that because now it's a bit like private public, yeah, as you brought up. But could it be interesting to do almost the same mapping, or but from another perspective? I think it will be super interesting to see. I mean, this kind of developments, I guess, also create something. You know, it has some kind of constructive resistances in the transition, so to say. So it would be interesting to see, maybe from the civic society perspective, what has happened there. Yeah. Has it created, you know, kind of positive things, or, you know, is things under construction?
Airbnb.
No, but I think, for example,
I was thinking individual action. You know, I will not be liberal to earn money, so I just started Airbnb. Okay, sure.
No, but for example, if you map like maybe alternative space, you know, like not kind of public spaces, but in relation to public spaces, maybe other kind of spaces has occurred, and other kind of ways of, you know, creating groups of discussions, or creating new ideas and so on.
Yeah, and we are discussing that a lot, and also want to follow some case studies, especially those centers who are now being sold, and follow those processes a bit more clearly and see what kind of.
And those are not private. That's in the various community that has the housing company, the communal housing company, behaving just like a regular private company. So I think that when we do the temporal, like sort of history aspect digitally, we'll see that it's not that the Swedish housing companies have been really much better, you know, because they've been doing a lot of selling and stuff like this. And when it comes to mapping struggles, and especially housing struggles, there are some maps already that show like squats that all are like around Sweden and all of Europe. They look a little bit different. They look more like Google Maps, you know.
So that information could be very interesting to kind of overlap with, you know,
Yeah. And we've been speaking, especially when we brought, because we have some money now from Kulturbryggan to make the digital version. So that's a discussion that we've had a lot, but we've also decided in this phase at least, we have to also limit ourselves, because we want to bring in too much into the map.
But one thing is also, I used to think about that is somehow also we create a method that, I mean, we could hope that other people would continue in this sense, because I think it's somehow it looks so easy. So I think it's very easy for people to attach. I mean, I've heard it always comes up different ideas. I mean, we could also involve the school system. We could, I mean, so many things. And also, I mean, you're always in this discussions about what to include and not. And I mean, we've also been in. It's very interesting now with the continuation of the subway. That could also be what people outside, or what centers outside this map are now doing to be able to, or just come in to get the subway.
So, especially for someone that's looked this from outside, the map itself doesn't speak very much, because it remains very analytic, that maybe requires some kind of information for people to arrive to. I'm wondering if also the first time Elof was talking about this, I think to me what was key of your project was the access, having access to the place. I mean, of course, the first thing, since it's infrastructure, I mean, that is crucial. But not only that, in relation to how to also avoid to the trap of public-private, and also, you know, take this as a provocative thing, just to push you, using maybe a classic leftist argument, the public is good, the private is bad, how we can go beyond that And to me, for example, access could be a way. Because, for example, this university or the university with the idea of houses, with the codes, I mean, that's for me, it's much more important because that's, in a way, what makes a place accessible and therefore maybe public. So if you have a place where you have to have access, and you map that as a public, it's not public, even if legally it's actually public. But if you don't have access to, it works like a private, as the same kind of segregation and way of not having access to. So I'm wondering if there is a kind of moment, and I think you're already starting to do that in this, and I think it's an interesting direction, which you first of all destabilize this idea of private and public, but also making even more, let's not think that the good comes only with the public and the bad is the privatization. No. Because in some cases, privatization actually opened access to certain places. The only, for now, my experience, for example, when I went to IKEA, these are the most multicultural places that I see in Stockholm. I don't see the same multiculturality here in the center, in this island. And this is public. So for me, what is relevant, this is the most segregated place than IKEA. So why I have to, hammering IKEA, meanwhile, we have all the public spaces that don't have the same access that IKEA actually has. And I think what the craze about capitalism that actually works in a way that make us shaking and our terrain of simply simplifying, this is good, this is bad. I think we have to embrace that and try to find maybe other categories, and maybe, here I say access for me, for example, is a very simple category that actually allowed for you to enter in a way that really challenge the space itself, rather than be trapped into, these are just capitalist people, because maybe some of these projects, actually they did something for the people around the area, because, they had different kinds of services that they didn't have before, despite actually they privatized. I don't know. And again, I'm saying this as a provocation, but I think with the hope that is a way that can work different categories without the kind of frame that is already there and it's already judging what is good and what is bad.
I think it's something that we speak about a lot. That's also, it can be read like that. I mean, and as Sarah pointed out, even if the property owner is a municipality, it doesn't necessarily mean that they are better than the private owner. But it's still a challenge. There's still maybe a lack. There's access, but without rights, maybe. And there's a lack of knowing what rights we have, and the spaces do not signal that we have the rights as citizens that we actually have. They are accessible, and they are actually meant, in the law, they should function as public spaces. So maybe that's where we have to push for our rights also. So I think that's something that we didn't speak so much about. But we have this
I'm always very excited because already what you said about how we can define access in operation is already a kind of interesting direction, so that it's not just a category. No, but what does it mean that you have access to the place and what you do there? What it does, not per se, as a good category. I think that's, to me, it's already something that is evolving, and you create new category of conceptualizing this and giving tools for people really then to say, yes, I have access to the place, but also what I can do there. Can I only shop there, or I can do something else too? That's, to me, it seems the most interesting direction. Thank you.
Any other comments? I was just, it popped into my mind because, talk about access, and I have this scene of one of the earlier Born Identity films. What is it, where the guy doesn't have his identity anymore, he doesn't know who he is. And so he's continuously going through public spaces and private spaces, aware of the surveillance systems. And then the whole game, of course, is what he can access and can't access with no identity and identity. So I would probably throw in yet one more thing, which is, is our identities as known publicly now, because now, you carry your card, you're emanating your identities in almost very precise manners. So it's also changing accessibility in ways that should also make us think about the future. Where is this going to go? So Well, okay, I'd like to thank you guys. Maybe we should do a 5-minute break. We need to reorganize one.